to all the dispossessed youth of Africa, for perpetuation of communion with ancestral spirits through the fight for African freedom, and in the firm faith that the dead, the living, and the unborn will unite to build the destroyed shrines. Selah. Hello and welcome, beloveds, to Ask Dr. Mumbi. My name is Dr. Mumbi Saraki. How are you doing? How's everything going? I really do pray that you are well in all your ways and that you're moving into living life truly on your own terms. We really want to thank every single person that has subscribed to the channel, beloveds. Go ahead and like and share. Just smash that like button, as they say, so that we work with the YouTube, we ride those YouTube algorithm waves. Special shout out, of course, to our Patreon family. We appreciate, love you so much. If you really want to know what I think about the pandemic and what's going on, definitely consider joining us on that platform. You know, a lot of people get discouraged to either come back to Africa or visit Africa because they've totally bought into the Western narrative that China has taken over Africa and the Chinese are controlling Africa and the Chinese are taking over Africa. And I get so many questions, and I had actually done a separate show on this for my Karibu Nyumbani team. It's a new relocation service that we've started. The links and descriptions are down below. And, you know, because a lot of people were scared about moving to different countries in Africa because they felt like, you know, the Chinese control everything. So what's the point? And that's how I say the narrative is so powerful, beloveds, because it makes you believe a thing without even seeing a thing or confirming a thing or even checking who wrote that thing. And this whole narrative of China invading Africa, there are certain truths, but let me tell you, first and foremost, China is everywhere. China has taken over in Europe, you know, until they even had to stop them from buying certain ports, like, because they were literally buying entire ports. You saw China with I don't know if you've been following the China-Malaysia issue and the China-Sri Lanka issue, how they built a port and then the country became indebted. It was like China went on this global invasion, beloveds. But a second thing to be mindful of is that China has bought up a lot of African media or has invested heavily in African media and African academics. Of course, they've tried to tell us that, you know, this is good because they helped us with the first liberation struggle and they're here to help us to be independent this time around. But it's all their bigger agenda, beloveds. So that's why certain narratives or certain negative stories about China, you know, get killed before they've even seen the light. But what most people don't know is that, you know, there are varying narratives about China-Africa relations. And what most people don't know is that, first of all, the investment is very small. And I'll share some facts. This was actually done by the Africa Report, and I found it so interesting. But that most of the articles that you read about China's influence in Africa have actually been written by Mzungus. And even the ones that you see locally have been read by locals, researched and written by Mzungus, and then taken, copy-pasted, and put in our local papers. So it's a very exaggerated thing. And I feel like because we don't recognize how much power is in the mind and in the mental, and we think it's all just stories and governments doing this and that, we're not fully aware of how much power we give China. Like, you think China controls Africa, so it will determine your future destiny and you'll decide not to move to a continent that you've never visited? It's crazy, beloveds. And I think that, you know, if we were to look at it, because there's been this whole, one of the narratives has been that, you know, China is just taking all the minerals and gems and gold from Africa and literally like destroying the environment. But if you were to actually look at the statistics, you would see that the European Union, Babylon, is taking the way more and extracting way more gold for nothing in countries like the Democratic Republic of Congo and many others, in Mozambique, which has the biggest ruby belt. And so it's just like now they've pushed China to the forefront and they're hiding behind China when they're the ones. And the only reason they're doing this is because they're threatened. Their whole system is threatened, you know? Their whole system is under threat, how they were easily taking it. But some of the things that the report was saying is that, they always say that, China has invested 10,000 kilometers, has built 6,000 kilometers of road and 10,000, no, sorry, 10,000 kilometers of road and 6,000 kilometers of railway across Africa. But when you actually look at it, that's only equivalent to under 20% of the length of the 9 highways in the Trans-Africa Highway Network, or just larger than the length of Liberia's entire road network. So even that is exaggerated, because we're always made to see Africa as so small when it's massive, it's gigantic. So, for the last 20 years or so, many African countries have looked east because, China came with investment without, without attachment, without strings. Because a lot of what a lot of African countries were finding is that as they continue to take money from the West would say, okay, implement the LGBTQ agenda, make it legal. Okay, your human rights is like this, you're this. So it was a very paternalistic relationship. And I've discussed this a lot in the past, where they were always dictating. They never saw Africans as equals. You think the government's ain't racist? So they always used to look at us, and then you're going begging bowl in hand. So, so that's why a lot of countries looked east. But when it comes even to, China is an important trading partner of Africa, but it's not the main one. Many countries, their main trading partner is their former colonizer. And that has been done like that for a reason. Exports from Africa to China compared to total worldwide exports to China over the last 20 years have fluctuated between 2 and 4%. So the bigger issue is but we import way, way more. But, another big narrative, beloveds, that is totally exaggerated is this a thing about how indebted Africa is to China. And that's why a lot of people say China owns Africa. It's a lie, beloveds. I'll explain to you how big of a lie this is right after this.
Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. Wake up, Africa.
Welcome back, beloveds, to Ask Dr. Mumbi. How much power does China really have in Africa? That seems to be the question. And, depending on how you answer that question, will really indicate to you just how much you have bought into the Western framed narrative that China is taking over Africa. China has taken over these countries, and they're going to take over this and they're going to take over that. There are certain truths to that. And I think, one of the things is China didn't realize Africa is a different ball game. And you'll recognize that. You have to ask yourself, why have the colonizers always been able to take our minerals, etc., but they've never been able to take the land, beloveds? You see, I really believe, at the depth of things, that Africans have much more power and control in Africa, but that power and control is being scattered. It's being scattered daily. It's being shattered daily in our disunity, in keeping us obsessed with petty issues. But China has actually been taking over the whole world. That's the truth. And the narrative that we've been getting about China has been framed by the West. And there have been many incidents, but there are also incidents with Muzungus, and incidents with Lebanese, and incidents with Indians. But if you look at how global media picks up those stories when a Chinese, boss shoots his workers or whatever, which is totally unacceptable. But one thing, that I have noticed is that there's, first of all, not as many Chinese walking around as people say. And I think when we say, oh, there's so many of this, all they've taken over, we don't recognize how much power we're giving them, power that they don't even have. because it's the mind that is creating the world, beloveds. And I think we forget that. And one of the, and and there's been various narratives, as I mentioned before we took the break, that have been mentioned, that have been driven by Babylon. The chief one being that China is taking over Africa because they're building all these roads for us, when in actuality it's only 20% of our total road network. Still sounds big though, and 10% of our current rail network. So it's like a drop in the water. So that's one of the narratives. Another one is that China is just extracting all our minerals and our gold and taking advantage of that, when actually Babylon, Europe, is extracting way more than China is, and is taking it, and is exploiting our people on much grander scale, and they've been doing it for a much longer time. So another narrative that they always say is that China, the indebtedness, that African countries are indebted to China and are owned to China. But the truth is, according to African Report, that it's just 3 African countries who owe over 40% of their debt to China: the Republic of Congo, Djibouti, and Angola, while 3 other African countries owe 40% of their debt to the private sector. That's Mauritius, Nigeria, and Zambia. And we found that actually, Zambia was one of the defaulters recently. And the reason they actually defaulted is because the government said, it's a lot of the deals are private banks, etc., private institutions, so we can't dictate to them to cancel, debt, etc., etc. So they say, but for other majority of African countries, they have a much broader mix of creditors. China, the reason they chose China, as I explained before, is because of this consensual kind of relationship, where a lot of Africans felt that with China, they were equals partners at the table. And the only people we can blame if we get into a bad deal with China really is ourselves. Meaning that we weren't good enough negotiators. We had the wrong negotiators at the table. And that has been the problem for Africa. We're not as disempowered and out of control of the continent as people would like us to believe. That's part of the narrative. China's taking over, China's taken over. And then people will actually make decisions around that. All I can tell you, beloveds, is if you haven't visited the continent, especially recently, if you haven't walked around, if you haven't gotten the vibe for yourself, then really all you know is what Babylon wants you to know. And we need to now stop giving so much power, like seeing these countries as such powerful entities, when we are in control of our nations. We have constitutions that if we fully understood and understood, and got like people who really had the best interests of the country together, we could shift things very quickly. We're so blessed and highly favored that the majority of our population right now is under the age of 25. Some even under 18. Which means that within a generation, the landscape of Africa will, not even could, will totally change. But China is not in control of Africa, beloveds. Don't buy into the Babylon hype. Tuko pamoja.